Chicago. Today's speaker is Janet Kuypers. Three poets who will be reading at the open mic. It's a curated, vetted open mic, so if you ever want to do it in the future, contact me and we will talk about it. The three poets that are going to be doing the open mic are Janine Ravaslut, yay! Tom Roby, yay! And GPA James Gordon, the poet unsub. I still don't know what an unsub is. Okay, first of all, I'm going to do a quick little interview and introduce you to Janet. A lot of you know her, but I don't know her, so I'm going to ask her a lot of questions. Okay? Beginning with, when did you start writing?
Technically, I was 9. I was in school and I had to do a poem for a class. A lot of people that come to my open mics might have heard me read the poem Under the Sea. I helped from my mom. And it actually got published in Read magazine, which is so I guess I started my publishing career in 1980. But I did that and it rhymed and I started trying to do rhyming poems and I just thought how that did not work. And I mean, the one in the beginning was very good, but when I tried to just come up with things to rhyme, they just failed miserably. So I just started pouring my powder as I got older, and that kind of worked for me instead.
Very good, very good. And she's been published quite a bit. How many books do you have out?
Well, the books I have out are through Scars Publications, which is something that I've run. So I can't go saying, oh, 18 gazillion people have published me. Although I've been published many times in many, many magazines. I've had, portions of books, covers of books, magazines. My own books, just because I would do things reflective of, I did a performance art show at the cafe called Come See Please. I did a book release of that. So I have many books, over 70, which you can see some of them there because I've got some of them. I'm like, here, I'm going to get rid of them. So if anybody like a book, they're dirt cheap right now. But I mean, I think I checked from other sources, not from my own. I've been published over 6,000 times for writing and over 2,000 times for artwork. Because I take pictures.
That's right. That's the other thing I didn't know about Janet. She's also a fine photographer. And she's traveled around the world and documented her travels. And we have some pictures here of Beijing.
Photos from everywhere, and that one happens to be in Rome, and performance art stuff. I've just got a bunch of images sprinkled throughout so you can see some of that stuff.
Prolific writer, prolific photographer. Her work is excellent. Do pick up, a book or two of hers. It's terrific stuff.
I even said for all of them, everything there, $8 each or 2 for $5, which is so much cheaper than what the smallest books are for. So stock up, get them off of my hands.
Oh.
Well, I've got a lot of these extra
collection. Add them to your collection, really. You can read stuff on the internet, but when you hold a book, there is something special about the feeling of a book. And even though the future is electronic publishing in that area, people still like the feel of a magazine, the feel of a newspaper, the actual pages, touching them. The trees. A tree gives us life. Well, actually, a lot of trees in your case. What's the environmental footprint that you
Probably substantial, I don't want to think about it.
Okay. Now, can you give us some of your poetry? And then I'll ask you some more questions.
Okay, I had 3 poems. I always try to, we rounded 3. So I was going to do 3 poems that are periodic table poems. For people who do not know, the thing I've decided to start doing is writing a poem for every element in the periodic table. If you would like, I can read it up there, or I guess I could scream it out and read it here. What's anybody's decision? They're pointing. Go up there. I might take the microphone. This is not right back going forward. I have decided to be doing this, and some of the elements they only have like 4 atoms of, and they don't know anything about them, which means I get to use creative license and do something with it because I have no idea. The music you're going to hear in the background for all of these poems is from the Sahel Band of South Africa. I believe it's a track from the 2011 Hotel Music, and it's called The Loose, L-O-S-E, The Loose. This first one is a poem number 58 in the periodic table. Let's see if this is queued up properly. And this is Syrian. Joining commuters driving toward the Chicago Loop, I watched majestic skyscrapers frame the skyline as I witnessed over Lake Michigan early morning clouds thin at the top. Each cloud looked like a snow-capped mountain. Then at the top that was framing this flatland city surrounding the skyscraper skyline. But all of those clouds were only formed in the mornings by early morning weather pulling water daily from Lake Michigan. And when the water from the lake is warmer than the deep water rises into the air, is cool enough so that lake water forms those clouds. But the thing is, Lake Michigan is more than hydrogen and oxygen. At times, they even warned the public not to go into the unsafe water. The same water that Chicago filters for everyone to shower in and drink. So I checked some of the studies on what foreign compounds Lake Michigan actually contains. And at times, you can find anything from cadmium, mercury, lead, or zinc to copper, chromium, even cadmium, selenium. But that list contains harmful elements. But the numbers that were really off the charts were cerium. Cerium acts like calcium in the human body. And you can find a lot of cerium in tobacco plants. And with cerium's moderate toxicity, prolonged exposure can lead to itching, heat sensitivity, or skin lesions. And wait a minute, cerium can spontaneously ignite in the air if the air is hot enough. And you may be thinking that if cerium is in water, you should be safe. But water can't be used to stop a cerium fire because cerium reacts with water to form hydrogen gas. Well, if cerium fire fumes are toxic, then so much for Lake Michigan being good for you, even when Chicago has multiple water purification systems. Because cerium in the water that forms those morning clouds is one thing, but no matter the toxicity of cerium, remember that us humans are like 70% water. And with all the compounds that cerium goes into, it's probably best if cerium's left to its industrial uses instead of working its way into our water. But it is nice to think that those beautiful morning clouds framing the Chicago skyline with snow-capped mountains are actually more than just hydrogen and oxygen. Because every once in a while, look up at that morning sky. Because in just the right way, a little cerium can really go a long way.
With all the elements on that periodic table, I mean, I took chemistry, okay, plural. How do you begin to write a poem about an element? What goes, give me some context. What do? Do you research it?
Of course I do. And in the beginning, things are easy. Oh, I'm going to write something about hydrogen or oxygen. Well, that was easy to pull off because you can think of water, and you can think of, and I came out, that actually fuels fire with oxygen, so it's easy to come up with some of the basic ones. But then as I've gotten toward, and I've just been randomly going through and picking ones, and as I've gone through, it was interesting to find things about the nuclear capabilities and how things have been found in that. But I would look for something and then say, hey, I've got this idea about Lake Michigan, and what is in Lake Michigan? So I start looking, I'm like, cerium. Tell me something about cerium, and that's how I would make the connections to then go into writing about cerium for an existing poem idea. So It's getting more interesting. And as I said, the ones at the absolute end of it, some of them don't even have names yet, so they just have Roman numeral names like Ununactium is 118. They haven't figured out a name for it, they've gotten 4 atoms of it, and they haven't been able to do any research on it. So I made something about how you've been so elusive, and I haven't been able to know about you, and change it in that way to people. You, as I said, use some creativity to figure out where to come with phonetically.
So the elements are really not a fixed number, or are they?
Well, at this point, there is 118, yes.
Okay.
And that's the top end one. But some of them they just don't know enough about, and some of those they haven't touched yet. But I probably would say I'm probably 2/3 to 3/4 the way through with it. And I found ones, I'm like, oh, and I've got to do another one about hydrogen. So I'll have a bonus poem for hydrogen, or a bonus one for oxygen, or something. So, because I'm going to do hydrogen cyanide, that's my next one.
Oh, so you started combining the elements.
And sometimes like one of them that I had mentioned, has 2 poems recently that I just did a feature with Budo 309 at my poetry open mic, and I had 2 poems that are 2 elements that I mentioned and that I had already covered. So yeah, it's interesting to just try to figure out ways to throw elements into your poetry. I mean, literal elements, not elements of writing your ideas.
When you write a poem like that, do you presuppose that your audience knows enough about science to grasp the meaning? And by meaning, I'm saying some poems are about feelings. Are you trying to evoke a feeling about an element?
Sometimes I am, and you might discover that in one of the other ones, because I've got fermium and polonium are the next 2 for the rest of this hour. And polonium, I mean, you definitely get ideas about polonium by the point when you're done with it. Some of them, I mean, the first piece when I talked about oxygen, I started by how I was going to swim with the white-tip sharks right off of Galapagos Islands, and I was swimming, and I'm like, you're cool. And I just kept going and kept going underwater, and I'm like, oh crap, I'm gonna need some air. And I look up and it seems really far away, and I know that water has oxygen in it, but I can't get to it, and I'm trying to get out. And so when I get to the surface, I'm coughing, and then they end up getting me in a fire somewhere, and I'm like, oxygen's, supported for this, and I needed it for air. It wasn't the water around me. And so I would, just find out different ways to be able to incorporate. A lot of the poems, I might say stats about, oh, by the way, this was here, which you'll get some of with fermium and possibly polonium. But some of them might be a lot more elusive at the same time. So,
would you ever tailor a poem to educate a child? In other words, could you make your poems about the elements reach out to a child to use a vocabulary that would introduce the child to the element in a way that it would educate as well as entertain? A funny kind of, because you have a great sense of humor.
Sorry, and a funny laugh. I've never tried to. What I think is funny is I run 2 literary magazines. The first one I did, I named it after a poem of mine called Children, Churches, and Daddies. And it has nothing to do with any of those things. The poem was about the dysfunctionality of those things sometimes. And so I've never thought of doing things that are, kids' interest stuff. And in fact, they talked about that first poem I'd ever written, side note. A person or 2 are going to be working on drawing it, and it will be like a child's book or a children's book.
A coloring book.
Well, I think one of them with Cindy Johnson, we might set it up and have it be like, we'll have ones that's just drawings, then maybe one with a little bit of color in corners, and then full-blown color. So it could be something that kids could do. I know that someone else is doing it, and I think they are just going to be designing it, Victor Fan, as a color thing. I don't know how, I have no idea what I'm going to do with these things, but it's just novel because I've never done stuff for kids stuff, and now I'm taking the first poem I ever wrote and making children's books out of them, which is stunning. And you were asking about, would I tailor the poems that I'm writing for children? I don't, some of them might be good for that. And actually, the next one that I have here for the middle of the thing, for fermium, although it's not addressed to kids, you talk about and you learn a lot of stuff about how elements were formed and history in that poem, which might go for that. I have never tried to make this a children's interest.
Educational thing.
I mean, it's becoming that way.
Horrible educational.
The E word. Education.
Is Cindy Johnson in the audience?
No, Cindy Johnson is that man's sister, and she's doing something for her grandchild. So it's going to be a little boy looking out of the sea and all that stuff for it. So that'll be for a gift for a grandchild.
Can we have another poem?
Well, since I mentioned that the two poems, sure, I sure can. I'm not going to do it last time. This is a poem. This is number 100 in the periodic table. This is called Fermium. When the bulldog ant of Australia is cut in half, the halves see each other as enemies. The head tries to eat the tail, and the tail, in an effort to defend itself, battles for up to 30 minutes to sting the head. And this battle happens everywhere in the world because life is always that battle between the two halves of the whole. Because everything contains that twin, one part good, one part you're so construed into something so horribly wrong, and you want to tear it apart, that other half. You despise everything about it, everything that somehow is a part of you. So you, in life, always possess that battle. This even applies on the molecular level. Consider hydrogen. It's in our water we drink and breathe in and bathe in. And atomically, we're 67% hydrogen. But on November 1st, 1952, Ivy Mike was the code name for the first successful test of the hydrogen bomb. It's funny how we can take something so needed for our life and let go our sun, turn it into something to destroy everything that we know. Because as I said, one side gives life, the other kills. And thanks to Ivy Mike and that hydrogen bomb, two elements were discovered. One of them was named after physicist Enrico Fermi. You see, Fermi worked on Chicago Pile 1, the first nuclear reactor. Fermi worked in a space under Chicago University's then unused football stadium bleachers. That's because the school had not used the football stadium for 3 years because the school thought that sports were a distraction from academics. Oh, Fermi, the father of the atomic bomb, also worked on the Manhattan Project, and Fermi Lab outside of Chicago was named after him. And here's the kick. The hydrogen device that produced fermium was designed by Richard Garwin, Enrico Fermi's student. So for all that Enrico Fermi had done, it seems fitting that fermium is the heaviest element formed by the nuclear bombardment of lighter elements, like hydrogen. And this highly radioactive element was initially kept secret due to the Cold War. But it's amazing how we can discover and what we can discover while taking something we so need for life and turning it into an instrument of death. Because fermium was classified in the Cold War, Swiss scientists bombarding oxygen discovered an isotope of this element and wanted to name it Centurium to honor element 100. A good thing Fermi's nuclear work got declassified so they could honor Enrico Fermi with fermium. But wait, fermium is bad. It's radioactive. There can't be any good applications for it. Well, consider the two sides of any twin. Fermium is the only element where we can use its alpha particles in radiotherapy for cancer. And yes, it's radioactive, but its short half-life means it decays quickly. Because, as I said, it's amazing how two sides can be both bad and also so good.
I've noticed in your poetry that's more evocative and more, dealing with relationship, okay, you do address the duality. When you look at the duality, is there a possibility of it being trifold? In other words, we always look in terms of yin and yang, the good and the bad. Is there an area like 50 Shades of Grey where there's something in between?
Oh, of course there is. I think that, I'll just be loud. Of course there are many different levels, all depending on what you wanted to talk about. Something like that element could be used for cancer. There might be things for it that could also be used for something for producing something for cars, and that's helpful. It's not life-saving, but it's helpful. I mean, there's always scales of things. Or it could be something that's generated after a nuclear blast, which is not so, I mean, there's always different levels. It was easier, at least in that sample, just to be able to say, oh, there's two sides, and use that for that piece. So there's always so many levels, but.
How important to you when you read is the audience reaction? Are you watching the audience when you read? Do you feel that you are connecting with each person in the audience when you read?
If I have a poem memorized, I can look at the audience. I half know these things. I can look up at some points talking about the ant, the bulldog ant, but I'm like, well, I can remember some of this, and then I can look around, and actually I will try to make a point then to actually look at somebody or something. I also love it if I hear, I'm glad that somebody laughed when I said that they decided not to use the football stadiums because they thought that sports were a distraction from academics. Because I thought that was so funny. And it was nice to hear that somebody reacted to that. So, I mean, it's always, any sort of feedback at all is very, very helpful. It's not always possible if I've got a brand new poem and I'm reading that I can't stare and look at people. I try to remember something of it so that I can make eye contact, because I don't want people to just think that I'm going to be sitting here and reading something from a book and I'm not paying attention and I'm not going to be very loud with the mic, and so that gets lost. I'd like to be able to interact somehow more with people so that they can feel like they are a part of something instead of just hearing something that they used to go to an iPod and just not pay attention, and tune out easily. I try to connect with people, although I don't know how well I do it, but I try.
How do you gauge your audience's response to your poetry? Do you have, that's sort of like, people talk about, how do you get an audience from poetry?
Well, most of the time when I'm reading, I am at an open mic, probably the one I'm hosting, and occasionally at another one. And the only thing that I can really judge it on is the amount of applause I get at the end, or how long that might last. Periodically, somebody might come up and say something to me, which I greatly appreciate, because I don't have many things to be able to judge on, especially because if I happen to be reading a poem and not able to look up at everyone, I don't know if they're really paying attention or not. So any feedback I can get is wonderful. Because I run a poetry open mic, I'm still going to go up and do stuff and just keep at it, because that's what I do. But the more response I get from people after the fact, the better. Otherwise, all I've got to rely on is the amount of applause again, which is sad and silly, but if you've got nothing else.
Well, when you're writing, do you have your audience in mind, or are you courting the muse? Does it come to you as an idea?
I have an idea. I apologize to any audience in the future. I don't write for you. I get an idea, and I want to, it might become, as I start developing something, how can I turn this into something for others to appreciate, have something come full circle? Starting with that poem off of Two Halves and a Whole, with a story that had nothing to do with the element, and talk about the different elements of the element, and I talk about all this bad stuff, well, wait a minute, there can't be anything good for you. Well, bring that back in and come up with that 2 halves, the whole idea. That was in the case with that one, you asked if there were many shades. And I said, well, of course there are. In this case, it was talking about the 2 halves of the head and tail of the ant, which is where that all started from. So I might work on refining or finishing so that it reaches a wider audience. But my initial ideas for things are ideas that just come to me not because I'm thinking of something for an undisclosed, elusive other. Because you can't come up with ideas for this cloud that you don't know anything about. If you have ideas in your own head, you have that and you want to be able to fashion that and then bring it in a way so that others will know, appreciate, understand.
Before we move to her next poem, is there anyone in the audience that has a question? Everybody awake? Paying attention?
They're paying attention. I'm making eye contact.
There's a quiz at the end of this, you know.
A quiz.
Just kidding. Okay, another poem.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the periodic table. This is Polonium. On the Indonesian island Java, large turtle skeletons litter the plains. Because after the turtles come in from the ocean to lay their eggs, swarms of wild dogs there got together and pounced. Those wild dogs flipped the turtles over and stripped them completely from their shells before they ate them alive. Because we have to remember that life is a constant avoidance of death. Since later on, many of those wild dogs who killed the turtles were prey to the tiger, who later pounced upon them. This is the cycle of life, because every birth is a prelude to death. Remember this. Don't forget. Keep in mind that elemental polonium changes in a nuclear reactor to form polonium-210. Because the former Russian agent Alexander Litvinenko was the first man to be poisoned to death from lethal polonium-210-induced heat radiation. So yes, because life is just a prelude to and a constant avoidance of death, this polonium-210 poisoning marked the beginning of an era of nuclear terrorism. I know, this is only a part of polonium, and they found that polonium's electrical conductivity changes with its temperature, making it perfect for eliminating static electricity. And because of its short half-life, its decay generates heat, so it's a convenient light source to generating thermoelectric power in space satellites and lunar stations. Because it's great that for space, no moving parts are required for power from polonium. Yes, I know, it's radioactive. Marie Curie discovered it, discovered polonium and actually named it after her homeland, Poland. And she even coined the phrase radioactivity while working. She even worked so diligently that on her own wedding day, she wore a black dress because she could then wear it for the work she later had to do. Marie Curie wore a black dress to her own wedding. Maybe she knew that life is a constant avoidance of death. Life is just a prelude to death because though polonium otherwise seems like a relatively harmless element, polonium-210 can still be used as just the right element for nuclear terrorism. With polonium, there's much to learn. And because when alloyed, it can be a portable neutron source. Polonium is even used for making photographic plates. But then again, polonium is the only element of cigarette smoke found in lab rats to reduce cancer. Polonium was produced in World War II's Manhattan Project. It was even part of the design for the Fat Man bomb on Nagasaki. Yeah, polonium has many good qualities to us humans, but keep in mind that life is still a constant avoidance of death. So despite what good we look for in polonium, this element can also be an instrument of death. Remember this. Don't forget. And I've got all of them, I tint them color when I've actually got them done, so they can see how many I've got done for the color.
Thank you. Did you bring any of your personal poems with? Anything you can deliver extemporaneously?
Oh, I've got a few of those.
Okay.
Well, first, I might as well, I'm going to end with that child poem. And I'll go with a women's issue poem, which some of you may have heard before. I think this one's a fun one. And you have to keep in mind that I wrote this based on a time that I was once blonde. This poem is called Too Far. That's interesting. This poem's called Too Far. When he met me, he told me I looked like Kim Basinger, long blonde locks. But this time around, I knew I wasn't her, and I could never be her, and I was never good enough, thin enough, pretty enough. So I got a perm, I straightened my teeth, I bought the Wonder Bra, but that wasn't doing the trick. So I decided to exercise. I went to the gym, I used the stair stepper, I ate rice cakes and wheat germ, but I wasn't thin enough. I dropped 20 pounds. So I went to the spa, and I wrapped myself in mud, I soaked myself in cellophane, and I bought the amino acid facial creams, but I knew they didn't really work. So I went to the doctor, and I got my nose slimmed, and my tummy stabled, and my thighs sucked. Thought about getting a rib or two removed. Yeah, you know, like Cher. But I figured they've got to be there for something. And hey, that's just going too far. And you mean that what the ways women will hurt themselves to make themselves beautiful?
Well, yes,
Yes.
because women, and we can talk about women and women's issues. Basically, women are taught not to like themselves, and society reinforces that. It's not a good thing.
I worked as an acquaintance rate workshop facilitator for years, and I did brochures and flyers, and I'd hear stories because I think I heard in college that 1 in 4 women will be raped, acquaintance raped something, and it happens to a lot of them because you think that you can't stand up for yourselves, or you think, oh well, I shouldn't have dressed that way, or and there are so many different angles, there's so many different things. We're given so many mixed messages, and we don't know how to stand up for ourselves, or we're afraid to stand up for ourselves. I mean, there are so many. So yeah, I have a lot of women's issue pieces, but I won't give you another one of those.
But you will give us another poem, another emotional poem.
That a man that I had once dated was, well, he had just died. He was a diabetic, and I've got to find where on earth this poem might be. Here it is, $2.85. This book, by the way, you can get for $3 or 2 for $5. I'm buying from here, so $2.81. I'm very close. And so I was in a hotel because I couldn't get anywhere for the services. I couldn't get there on time to be able to pull it off because I just went out and I was actually in New Orleans by myself waiting for somebody to pick them up in the airport. So I wrote this a day or two after he died. And it's called Death Takes Many Forms. It is winter now. The trees have lost their leaves. The city is covered in a thin layer of soot and snow. The grass is dead. In the sunless sky, black birds circle overhead, searching for prey. An eerie cold settles over everything. Nothing is growing anymore. Death takes many forms. For you, death first came when you were 5 years old, and your mother had given you 3 shots of insulin a day before you could take the needle to yourself. Did it hurt to push that needle into your arm the first time? Or did it hurt you more to know you had no choice? Death takes many forms. Death could be someone telling you without trying that they are losing their sight. Behind Coke bottle glasses, you would see me and say, "That's a nice black suit you're wearing." And I would tell you, "It's green."
And you wouldn't believe me. You wouldn't hear the howling wind of the changing seasons. Death takes many forms. I know what follows the autumn wind. It is winter now. Do you remember what had happened? The changes are subtle. The temperature drops first only slightly. It's almost imperceptible. Only when the first snow falls do you realize where all the seasons have gone. Death takes many forms. Death is a sweat-soaked shirt that shakes, dizziness when you needed food. You would look as pale as a ghost as I would hold your cold, wet arm to steady you. Quick, some sugar will make everything better. Isn't everything better yet? Death takes many forms. The signs of death can come when you lose your circulation. My feet are numb, Janet. You'd say, I can't feel my feet anymore. And I would rub your feet for you, and you would say it makes a difference, and you feel better. If only I could do this forever. Death takes many forms. I said goodbye to you to travel my own road, but I didn't think it was the last goodbye. How was I to know? When you left, I knew you didn't want me to go. And now it's my turn. Why are we always saying goodbye to each other? Are you trying to teach me a lesson? Because if you are, well, I've learned it. You can come back now. Death takes many forms, and now it seems you've taken me down with you. You've taken me down in that casket with you, and I'm running my hand along your jacket lapel, and I can feel the coldness of winter all around me, and I can hear them shoveling the dirt over my head, and I want to get out, and I want to take you with me. Death takes many forms. Death can be that hole you left, right over here, just a little to the left. I keep wondering when all the pain will go away, when everything will be better. You once showed me that winter could be beautiful. Instead of the dark and dirty snow lacing the city streets, you showed me a quieting snowfall over a lake in your parents' backyard, glistening in an untouched whiteness. I told you I hated winters, and you told me, this you don't hate. Well, I'm still learning. It is winter now, and death takes many forms. The seasons change for you and I. It is snowing, and something is ending. It is snowing. Somewhere, it is snowing.
And I was alone. I had nothing and no one, and I was like, and I just started going. And that's what I came on. So.
And it came out
Boom.
in one
day. Boom, done. Yeah.
Yeah.
When a lot of times emotions, what's going to throw yourself into, you remember this. And I had written a poem called, it was something about that, listening over a lake and I wrote a poem about that, and I was like, wait a minute, I've been talking about death, and I have this winter thing, and I found that on the internet because I had my laptop with me, and I was like, I'm incorporating that in, ta-da, and just put that all together like that. But, and no offense, I wasn't writing that for an audience. Maybe I was writing that for Dave, I don't know. Or in a way, writing it for myself, just because what else could you do when you are grieving and you're alone and you can't do anything or get to anyone. These ideas are coming to you, and that just came out. And that's what I did. Do you want me to end on a happier note, or did you want to ask me something?
I do have a question. When you find that something is flowing through you, that you are an instrument that is being used by some higher power, when you go back and look at that work, do you find that you have to tweak it much, or it's pretty much the way it comes out is the way it is, except for punctuation and maybe a little
I might find that I will change a you or is or like something and add 2 words or remove 2 words to clear up the way I was saying a sentence. But pretty much the idea is there, and I just have to tweak it if I didn't come up with something perfectly like that. I was doing that with those poems. I'm like, that should be of to instead of if to, or something like, and I just written those and I'm like tweet, but that's, you come up with the idea and once it's done, boom. And I do feel the emotions, even when I'm reading them. I'm thinking about the ways that women try to make themselves beautiful. And it's getting like, I'm going to do this, I'll straighten my teeth, which you can tell I haven't done because my teeth aren't that straight. Or sucking getting my thighs sucked or tummy staple or whatever. You think about all those crazy things and that idea of that that mentality in your head all just comes right back. I did my best with this one because I thought you probably wouldn't like that much emotion because I get to the point where I'm almost crying when I'm running my hand along a jacket lapel. I'm like, tone that back. Don't do that right now. But I get that way because that emotion is there. And as you've heard, Kuypers rhymes with hyper. I'm very, and so I will just let it out. So.
It comes through in the performance. And I haven't seen this poem on the page.
Well, only $3 or 2 for $5. You can have a copy of this poem. There are 2 copies of Hooper there. And there's a book, Death Takes Many Forms. I believe that this one is in that book as well.
Excellent.
I can't remember, but anyway.
Let's get to the open micers. And we have Janine, who is going to read a couple of poems for us. Probably.
Are you going to have comments or questions for Janet?
Oh, sure. Yes, the audience.
Okay.
Please, Lucia.
Thank you, Janet. Your poem about death takes many forms is absolutely exquisite. And I was reminded of something I read about Isaac Dinesen recently, who said that we can bear anything if we put it into a story. And that's what you did. That's a gorgeous example of it. The other thing is, two other things actually. One is as far as making oneself, a woman making herself more attractive. I think the ultimate example of that was Demi Moore, who completely top to bottom, inside out, God knows how many, hideous procedures she went through and how many bazillions of dollars, and he still left her.
He still left her.
I mean,
he was half her age.
Why did he do that? It's just madness.
I don't know.
And then my third thing was that I was part of a 2-woman show a number of years ago, and we had a director who was an actor/director, and what he told us about making eye contact with the audience is that it's not a good idea, that it's a distraction, and that when you look at someone in the audience, you should look at them here, not into their eyes.
Right.
Which has been useful to me.
Because you're not then making because doing too much eye-to-eye contact like that could distract you from what you're
Exactly
doing.
right. It derails you, and I think it makes the audience uncomfortable too. Anyway, thank you. Glad I was here.
Thank you all.
Lucia, excellent. Any more questions from the audience? Okay. Yes?
You were in a terrible accident many years ago. How has that impacted your poetry?
For those who don't know, they're having fun out there. For those who don't know,
I mentioned accident.
July 11th, 1998, I was stopped at an intersection. Car knocked me into oncoming traffic, and another car hit me. There were skid marks on my tires for 108 feet. I was unconscious for 11 days. I had to relearn how to walk and talk and eat. And I believe I died that day, and I don't know who you are talking to now. It is very, very bad, and I've changed. I think I have a lot of what was in me, but I think I've learned a lot of insanely difficult lessons that I'll never be able to get rid of. The only good thing that has happened to me after that accident is meeting the love of my life. John Young. So, and I'm so blessed. Thank you so much, John, for existing. If there is time, we're not going to do music after this thing is over.
Absolutely. Can we get Janine up here?
Thank you, Janet. Thank you.
I'll get the ladies want to stand or sit or whatever you like to do. Get stuff to. Yep, got it right here.
I'm not
used to doing stuff. Oh, okay. That's
in my nice way. Okay, great. Is it on? It doesn't even sound like it's on. Oh, yeah. Okay. I'm going to start off with a poem from my newest book, Floating Worlds, and the title is Off to the George Diamond Steakhouse. Off to the George Diamond Steakhouse, just the two of us, with mother sick in the hospital, sometimes 3 times a week to dine on bowls of chilled lettuce wedges, the house's special pink salad dressing, char-broiled steaks cooked by a chef in the middle of the restaurant's dining room, a side of baked potatoes lathered with sour cream, butter, heaped dinner rolls in a bread basket, Coke for me, a dry martini with a speared pearl onion for Dad, while Walter Keane paintings stare at us. My Mary Jane shoes hover above the soiled red carpet. One last drink. Here's Manhattan, a red cherry for me, a walk down Wabash Avenue at 9 p.m., a long ride home on the L, us looking up at a few stars that remind me of the glowing eyes of those painted kids in black wood frames. Thank you. I think I'm going to do a villanelle, desert villanelle variation. In the desert, the nights are cool and dry. At midnight, I find you curled like a question mark. In your sleep, you ask, who will feed me? Half laughing. This is the season of no reply. We lie down together in the dark. In the desert, the nights are cool and dry. I feel the breath of something passing. How can I remark? In your sleep, you ask, who will feed me? Half laughing. Sands shift in the bowl of sighs. A coyote slinks across the park. In the desert, the nights are cool and dry. What is the use of packing starving saguaros stand tall and stark? In your sleep, you ask, who will feed me? Half laughing. 4 more years of drought than these will die. We no longer swim beneath the starry arc. In the desert, the nights are cool and dry. In your sleep, you ask, who will feed me? Half laughing. This is a little bit tougher poem. It's called The Defectives. In 3 parts. The Defectives. 1. Subway roses in a dime store vase. Wild Irish rose bottles empty on the floor, on the bed. Broken glass. Recriminations. 2. Diego on the street, a hole in his heart. Shots. More shots. Slow motion getaway. Horns and pimps move in unison like choreographed dancers dodge bullets, while ice cubes drop, one by one by one. It's a motel ice maker. 3. Dawn, this fruit shows a daughter. Here's the life below the morphine lies, pinball machines, distorted mirrors, fun houses, impossible rides, arms thrown up in eyes, surrender poses, tunnel love, your uncombed hair off the pillowcase, blood, more blood.
And now we'll have Tom Roby read for us.
Okay, I have 3 poems here, 2 short ones and a longer one. And these are from my new book, Pressure Points. The first one is Capo di Ponte, the cape in the river up in northern Italy on the slopes of the Alps. A rainy Italian graveyard, bright with flowers, where steeple birds trade tunes with Angelus bells, and we climb dry steps under the Bona family chapel portico to view their formal portraits in the vestibule. After we lunch on cheese and red wine, I watch my smile fade in the cafe glass because I hate to leave any place. Until you reminded me, we will have a time when we won't have to leave. Here's one for Janet in her poem about death. This is a tarantella triolet, and it's named after the tarantula, which is in southern Italy, because that had a terrible bite. And I think the tarantulas in South America are named after it. And the prescription, if you got bit by this spider, was to do the tarantella, which, as you know, a famous dance from Italy. And this is a triolet. The dance of life is the dance of death. The dance of death is the dance of life. Dance until you run out of breath. The dance of life is the dance of death. Bump and grind while you still have breath. Fandango to the edge of the knife. The dance of life is the dance of death. The dance of death is the dance of life. Tarantella. And here's one from my Zen period. Hold that thought. Guru, my guru, once said, if I could hang on to a thought 3 seconds, I would be well on my way to nirvana. And if I could keep that thought in mind for 3 minutes, I would be in nirvana. So I saw 3 as the magic jumper that really woke me up. It got me stepping up to my Stairmaster to focus single-mindedly on the reflection in the window of my spider plant, which turned into the hairdo of a heartless girl who skipped out on me, the angry spider I wish I sent to her, a penitent parrot who gulped the spider, covetous cat that pounced parrot and so on, as ever more clearly this spider planted thoughts got me panting to reach the still center where I could hang out with the fugitive reality. So after a good 3 minutes of keeping fit, I stepped down and scribbled this poem, which Goro read and annotated. Good work. You have only 179 seconds to go.
And now we're closing out with John Yatko and Janet, and we're going to have to bring John Yatko back. I heard him prior.
Because he's asked to go out and grab a guitar.
Come on.
You guys gonna sing for us?
Yes, they
Well, he's
are.
not.
I'm not gonna sing for you.
He's going to have to be a
He's gonna play
feature one
instruments.
day. He's excellent.
And thank you. You get to go on the other. We should go. I've still got that computer thing. Go right on over here.
Yeah, sure. I don't know what I'm doing. Just because I got the monitor, but you want this little monitor, still go. But I don't know. This one, I used to be in an acoustic band, and this is an original song. The music behind it is from Warren Peterson. So thank you, Warren. And some of you know this one. This is what we did in life.
I don't know where this road is taking me anymore, and I don't know the right lines to say. I don't feel the things that you're feeling down deep inside of you, but I know this ain't the way. Nothing ventured, nothing gained, nothing changes, nothing stays the same. So you be your way and I go mine. Maybe one day we will find what we need in life. What we need in life. I watch the ashes from your cigarette fall to the ground, and I think this fire will die down. I think I now see what is happening here between us, and I have to say goodbye. Because nothing ventured, nothing gained, nothing changes, nothing stays the same. So you go your way and I'll go mine. Maybe one day we will find what we need in life. What we need in life. I can't stay bitter and lonely and restless anymore. Yeah, I can't stay here with you. I see the red in your eyes and it scares me out to death. And I'll take this road alone. Because nothing ventured, nothing gained, nothing changes, nothing stays the same. So you go your way and I'll go mine. Maybe one day we will find what we need in life.